As my family stepped into Le Mars, the city's most elite French restaurant, the maitre d' immediately recognized me. His brief flicker of surprise quickly vanished into professional composure. "Good evening," my sister Diana said, her voice dripping with the usual superiority. "Reservation for the Walkers, party of 4. I lingered behind, observing the familiar performance. My parents and sister parading designer labels, flashy watches, and an air of entitlement. They hadn't expected me to attend, but appearances mattered. No one could question why the eldest Walker daughter was missing. "Right this way," the maitre d' said, leading us through the pristine dining room. The staff exchanged subtle glances, quietly acknowledging me. Diana's gaze fell on my understated black dress, barely concealing her disdain. "I'm shocked you didn't dig out one of your bargain outfits, Sarah." "I have other priorities than designer labels," I said evenly. "Oh yes, like surviving in that tiny apartment," she sneered. Mom shot us a sharp look. "Girls, please. It's your father's birthday." Dad was already scrutinizing the wine list, his frown tightening at the prices. "These mock-ups are highway robbery," he muttered. I stifled a smile, knowing the wholesale costs. Leaning toward Mom, Diana whispered theatrically, "We wouldn't want her embarrassing herself." A waiter approached Jean-Luc, one of my most trusted employees, and I watched as my family immediately dismissed him as mere staff. "Can you even afford this place?" Diana asked, scanning the menu. "Maybe just an appetizer." Then Jean-Luc spoke. "Welcome back, Miss Walker. Your usual table was reserved for another party, but I trust this one will be satisfactory." Dad choked on his water. Mom dropped her menu. Diana's smug expression shattered into shock. "Perfect, Jean-Luc," I said, smiling. "Your usual wine, Miss Walker?" he asked casually, as if unaware of the social bomb he'd just dropped. "Yes, the 1982 Bordeaux, please." Dad went pale. The bottle alone cost more than his monthly country club dues. "Sarah," Mom whispered, stunned. "What is going on?" I sipped my water deliberately. "Oh, I forgot to mention, I bought Le Mars 6 months ago. Actually, the whole restaurant group." Diana's jaw hit the floor. "But you live in that tiny apartment. You shop at regular stores." "I choose to," I replied simply. "Success isn't defined by clothes or living space." Jean-Luc returned with the wine, presenting it with flair. "An excellent choice as always, Miss Walker. Shall I have Chef Michel prepare your favorite dessert?" "That would be wonderful," I said, smiling. "And bring the full tasting menu. It's a special occasion." As he left, silence settled over the table, the kind that comes when people realize they've been mocking the owner. My phone buzzed with a London branch update, but that could wait. I savored watching my family struggle to process that the daughter they overlooked now owned the restaurant, and the entire chain. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't announcing your success, it's letting them discover it while they sneer. Dad gulped his water, wishing it were something stronger. Diana frantically Googled under the table, desperate for confirmation. And me. I leaned back, picked up my menu and smiled. Dinner was about to get very interesting. The tasting menu arrived. Each dish arrived more breathtaking than the last. Chef Michel clearly relished putting on a performance, aware that I was at the table. My family poked at their plates in awkward silence, struggling to come to terms with the reality before them. At last, Dad broke the quiet, his voice tight. "How exactly did this happen?" I took a measured sip of the aged Bordeaux. "Remember that costly MBA you refused to fund? The one you said wouldn't matter because I focused on restaurant management instead of finance, like Diana." He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Diana suddenly found herself absorbed in her foie gras. "There was an untapped market for high-end restaurant transformation," I continued. "Today, my company operates 32 restaurants across 3 continents." Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. 32. Including Le Cirque in New York, Lame One in Paris, and that tiny London spot where you celebrated your anniversary. I nodded casually. That explains why we were seated immediately when I mentioned the Walker name. I smiled. But a word of advice. You shouldn't be rude to the staff. They notice everything. Jean-Luc arrived with the next course. A perfectly seared scallop, absent from the regular menu. Chef Michel's latest creation, he announced. Your thoughts, Miss Walker, before it goes on the permanent menu? I could see Dad mentally tallying the scale of my empire. The same man who had once told me restaurants were a waste of potential compared to his investment firm. The London branch opens next month, I added. Fully booked for the first 3 months already. Mom's voice wavered. But you told us last summer that you couldn't join us in London. I was overseeing the new restaurant's construction, I replied. Stayed in my own penthouse rather than the family hotel. Diana's phone buzzed. Likely a friend spreading word of the revelation about Lumar's ownership. Is that why you never upgraded your apartment? Or bought designer clothes? She asked. I invest in what matters, I said. High wages for staff, full health and education benefits. Building real value rather than flaunting wealth. The sommelier appeared with another bottle. Ms. Walker, the investment group is inquiring again. They want to buy the chain. Tell them what you always tell them, Philippe, I said, smiling. Not for sale at any price. Dad nearly dropped his glass. Investment group. Morgan Stanley, I said lightly. They've been trying for months. Offered 12 times earnings just last week. His expression, the man who once dismissed my plan, was priceless. Mom leaned forward, distressed. Why didn't you tell us? We thought you were living so modestly. Because real success isn't about showing off, Mom. It's about building something that lasts. I gestured around the dining room. Everything here I built myself. No inheritance, no family connections, no trust fund. Diana's face shifted from disbelief to calculation. So, reservations. Cut her off. Your name no longer guarantees priority. Some of our restaurants may be mysteriously fully booked next time you call. The dessert cart rolled up. Chef Michel's legendary soufflé paired with a vintage port, more valuable than Diana's designer bag. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, raising my glass. Consider dinner my treat, just as it's been every time you've dined at one of my restaurants this past year. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't merely owning the restaurant. It's letting them realize it while sitting at your table. It's about letting them realize they've been relying on your generosity without even knowing it. The port was divine, almost as satisfying as watching my family struggle to swallow both dessert and their bruised egos. By the time coffee arrived, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Diana's usual arrogance had melted into awkward attempts at flattery. Mom kept name-dropping friends eager to invest in my next project. Dad mostly stayed silent, probably replaying every moment he'd boasted about my sister's junior position while dismissing my small restaurant job. Ms. Walker, Jean-Luc approached. Chef Michel would like your input in the kitchen when convenient. The London menu requires your final approval. Diana practically bounced in her chair. Oh, could I come? I'd love to see. The kitchen is strictly for staff and owners, I said firmly. Health regulations. You understand. Mom tried a gentler tack. Darling, you must let us celebrate. Imagine our daughter a thriving restaurant owner. Funny, I replied. That wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was managing just one location. Jean-Luc returned with a folder, London's wine list and a note from Mr. Thompson about the Tokyo branch. Dad's head snapped up. Tokyo opens next spring, I confirmed. Though I'm sure Diana can fill you in. She just tried using the Walker name for a reservation in my Paris restaurant last month. Diana flushed crimson. I didn't realize the staff would report back. I know everything that happens in my restaurants, I said, smoothing the fabric of my black dress, a handmade piece from a tiny Parisian atelier. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with Chef Michel. But, it's Dad's birthday dinner, Mom protested. I've covered it, just as I've covered every meal you've had in my restaurants, I said, gesturing to Jean-Luc. Please ensure my family wants for nothing, and add the usual gratuity. Ownership doesn't mean free meals. That wouldn't be good business, would it, Dad? In the kitchen, Chef Michel greeted me enthusiastically, showing the London menu and planned wine pairings. Through the viewing window, I glimpsed my family huddled together, whispering. My phone buzzed. Diana first, apologizing for her arrogance. Then Mom, admitting they'd misjudged me. And finally Dad, acknowledging my vision and asking to discuss it. I typed one reply for all. Reservations required. 3-month waiting list. No exceptions. Then I returned to Chef Michel's creations, to the empire I'd built quietly, to the success they never anticipated. Later, in my modest apartment, actually the expansive top floor, intentionally sparse, I looked at a framed review from when I first acquired Le Mars. Unknown buyer transforms struggling restaurant into culinary empire. Unknown. Underestimated. Unstoppable. I sent one final text to my family. Next time you judge someone's worth, remember, they might own the ground you're standing on. Then I opened my laptop to review Tokyo plans. Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest reward isn't the finest wine or the perfect soufflé. It's watching them realize they've been dining in your achievement all along.